Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining our webinar today, announcing ShiftLeft Scan, which is a open source DevSecOps platform. Not only does ShiftLeft Scan leverage the best open source projects, ShiftLeft Scan itself is open source and free under the GPL v3 license. Our speaker today is Prabhu Subramanian. He is the architect at ShiftLeft and the creator of ShiftLeft Scan. So there's no better person to introduce ShiftLeft Scan than Prabhu. And with that, take it away, Prabhu.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks everyone for joining this webinar. It gives me great pleasure to announce ShiftLeft Scan and give a show and tell of the product myself and my team at ShiftLeft have been working on for the last few months. And before I start the demo and start explaining about Scan, I actually wanted to talk about the pre-webinar conversation I was having with a number of participants. Thank you very much for filling up the survey and for emailing your questions directly. It gave me a very good idea as to what exactly DevSecOps, DevOps people in the community are expecting from a tool like Scan. So I was able to keep improving my slides and my content. So I'll try to answer the questions at the end. But if you can keep using the chat panel to keep sending your questions, that'll be good. To begin with, so some of these are questions I got in the last 2 or 3 days by email and surveys. And what fascinated me was a number of questions, number of thinking were very similar. So I was able to group them all together. Questions like, hey, how do I even transition to DevSecOps? How do I even convince my team, convince my boss that DevSecOps is the right model for the organization, for the agile way of doing things? And questions like, do you support language X or framework Y? And how does your product compare against another product, commercial and open source, and so on? There was even questions around, is Scan going to replace pen testing efforts in my company? And I felt that that was a legitimate question. So what I would do is I would try to answer all these questions during my presentation. And if there are any additional questions, we can focus on them towards the end. So before starting to demo the product, I wanted to explain why we built this product, why I came up with Scan. The problem really starts with the misunderstanding, the misinformation regarding DevSecOps, right? So people think that DevSecOps is just putting DevSec and Ops together. And unfortunately, it's such a wrong formula, wrong way of doing things. Probably might have started with traditional vendors, security vendors or cloud vendors who had an existing product, an existing platform that was originally built for the security assurance era, where software gets developed, tested, and then right at the end, it gets security tested, security assured, along with penetration testing and all the other security testing demanding human people, right? Unfortunately, what happens is they then try to introduce the same traditional security testing softwares and processes into the modern DevOps, modern way of building and testing product, which is more agile, more continuous, right? We do continuous integration, continuous delivery, and continuous testing, right? So when we try to introduce security as an add-on, as an external thingy, then the whole program simply breaks down. So even with good quality people, even with very good processes in place, if the tools do not suit the processes, if the tools do not integrate into the workflow, then the whole program actually starts to fail, which was the story I was hearing and I was personally feeling on the field when I was doing DevSecOps consulting for large clients. And the solution really to me was to build a new DevSecOps platform from scratch and make it completely free and open source so that more people can use, benefit, and continue to enhance the platform. So that is how Scan started with a number of poorly thought out DevSecOps implementation concepts out there. The second frustration, the second challenge I was personally feeling, and I'm sure everyone in the audience would have felt, is that the tools had like a lot of competition going on amongst them. So I can understand that the security vendors, the cloud vendors, they want to retain their customers, they want to make use of their customer base to grow. So unknowingly or knowingly, these vendors started introducing what is called as a lock-in, where what happens is if you use a specific tool, say a static analysis tool, the data collected by these tools, the reports, the findings, simply cannot be used in another tool unless the customer spend a massive amount of time writing integration apps, integration services, like looking at the JSON or XML or API output from one tool and trying to correlate that information with another tool. So if the organization has a defense in depth policy where more than 2 or 3 tools are being used, say a static analysis tool, a dependency scanning tool, or a container scanning tool, or a cloud scanning tool, and so on, because of the differences in each of these tools, because of the lock-in, the customers end up spending more time to make sense of the information collected across these products. Sometimes the same information might be presented in slightly different ways, totally different ways. There will be a lot of false positive, false negatives. So eventually, because of the silos the products actually create due to lock-in, the silos then get translated into a real world where people then form silos around the products they support and implement and around the processes. And these are again one of the reason why DevSecOps as a whole has a bad name or leads to frustration, more chances of failure, and so on. And my personal belief is security is better together. So tools should collaborate with each other. Tools should interoperate with each other, and security vendors like ShiftLeft should collaborate and work with one another, because we all are trying to solve the common problem, which is to make all the applications secure and make DevSecOps a success. So I will speak about the ways ShiftLeft is collaborating with various partners and so on. Please keep sending your questions, by the way. You don't have to wait for all of the slides to be complete. And I can always take a look at the questions panel and fine tune my slides. So with that introduction, so I started working on Scan as an open source DevSecOps platform. In my view, Scan is a universal security scanner. What Scan essentially does is it abstracts away the nuances of various types of security scanning, like static analysis based scanning, or credential scanning, or dependency scanning, or container scanning, and so on, and makes it unified, that the DevOps people need not think anything about these differences. All they have to think about is how do I use Scan, and then Scan will take care of all the other elements for them. And Scan is purposefully built from scratch for workflow integration. So Scan software can be used as an IDE extension, as a Git commit hook, as CI build pipeline, release pipeline gates, and so on. So Scan essentially doesn't need any changes to the dev workflow, which is another interesting challenge. So some of the legacy tools, traditional tools, when introduced into an existing dev workflow, people find it so hard to use the tools that they end up changing the workflow to suit the tools, right? Which is unfair. So with Scan, we consciously built and designed the architecture to be in such a way that no workflow changes required to use Scan. But having said that, as a security consulting company, we would be absolutely happy to help clients fine-tune and tweak their workflow to make it more suitable for a shift left transformation, security from the left of the DevOps lifecycle. And Scan is a free and open source. Like I said, any good security tool should be easily auditable, right? This shouldn't be like a black box that salespeople say, just take my word for it, right? That's so all those days are gone. Now, in the modern era, there should be an evidence that the security tools themselves are good. The security tools themselves are built in a secure manner, and there should be a trust that by investing in a tool, we are not going to get into a trap due to a lock-in or due to something that will disappear when the company gets acquired and so on. So Scan is completely free, open source. It's available on GitHub. Most of the integrations we built as part of Scan are also open source, available on GitHub. So people like the participants here can feel free to go clone the repo, have a play, send us pull requests, and I think together we can improve the product. So without any more slides, I will quickly now go to the demo. Please send me the questions. I can see some of the questions popping up already. They're very useful in terms of highlighting the areas. So one of the things I found on the survey findings is the pipeline usage, and obviously Jenkins is like number one because that's one of the most heavily used pipeline in the world, and I had a close competition between Azure pipelines and GitLab, so I thought maybe I will show most of them here. To start with, I have a number of sample pipelines here on Azure pipelines. So if I start showing one of the pipeline output, so this is Scan performing credential scan, static analysis scan, dependency scan, all of them in the same pipeline, in the same CI job, and showing its output in the console log. So as you can see here, the class file analyzer, which is a static analyzer, has found a number of critical and high issues, so it has marked it as a failure. And there is a dependency scan summary here, highlighting a number of high critical issues. And if you scroll up, these are the dependency scan results. And this is license scan findings. So as you saw, a single scan can actually scan the source code in a number of different ways. So Scan is a multi-mode scanner. It can look for a range of security issues like credential leaks, static analysis-based security, license, and dependency. And for each of the scan, it can also do multiple analysis. For example, with static analysis, Scan can analyze both the compiled version of the source and the raw version of the source. And it can then use this information to guide other tools. For example, the dependency scanner will make use of the information from the static analysis tool to better understand how the dependency is being used in the project. And then it can adjust its weightage depending on whether the dependency is being directly used or whether the dependency is like an indirect dependency, or if it is a dependency that's simply not being used at all. So all of these tools seamlessly work in an integrated manner to reduce the false positives and provide a very high quality result. So this is the console output experience of Scan. And as you can see for this project, all of the steps took less than 2 minutes. So what we found was Scan is so fast, even for a massive project like WebGoat, which is like a 1 million lines of code project, all of this scanning finishes in less than 10 minutes. With Scan, all of the scan happens in your CI pipeline itself. So no source code, no secrets, dependencies leave your pipeline. There's no remote server involved. We are not tracking your usage and so on. Because all of the scans happen locally, it is immensely fast. It's very scalable compared to, say, an industry competitor, a really well-known brand. So to start with, their performance figure for WebGoat is around 30 minutes. And the second challenge is the competitor prices their software using the number of concurrency. And it might so happen that the organization has a limited concurrency that most of the time the security scan would end up queuing. And with queuing, what happens is developers and DevOps will simply use the product less. So they will scan only the pull requests, or they will scan only the releases, or they will just scan every 3 months, which is shift right model, isn't it? Whereas with scan, it is completely shift left. You can developers, DevOps can feel free to scan any number of times. There is no licensing restrictions. There is no performance impact. It is also possible to configure the pipeline so that the scan is not blocking the other build and test activities. So there is a lot of interesting ways scan can be configured to suit a modern DevOps team. And the benefit of showing all of the reports in the same console log is it limits the need for developers to visit multiple websites to see the information and make a decision whether the build was a success or a failure. Scan can do all of those things automatically. It can break the build or automatically depending on the findings, right? So this is the console experience. With Azure, what we did was we slightly took the experience a bit further than this. So we built a native extension for Azure called ShiftLeft Scan, which is also free and open source. And what this extension does is it takes the reports generated in the console and then presents it visually in this format as tabs. So if we navigate this area, so this is the class file-based analyzer, and it says there are issues being found, so it is marking it as a failure. It neatly presents the URL, the develop branch, and the commit information, talks about the URL of the whole repo, and then you have sections like a executive summary. So all of these reports, because they are integrated into the pipeline itself, DevOps people can go here, see the status of the build. Awesome. Even non-technical people like product owners, product managers, and security analysts, they can find the information about a particular application right in the pipeline itself. And it makes it very easy to have a contextual conversation when all of the information is presented together. And we have put a lot of thinking into how to make this report usable. For example, we provide recommendation whether the application needs to be remediated or not, and we also highlight key issues because, as people know, not every issue needs to be fixed immediately. So we have heuristics to determine which of the issues can be prioritized and so on, and we neatly present the findings, and it's very navigatable. We can click this link and it will show what file the report is talking about and so on. If I now quickly show you the dependency scan report, so dependency scan in this case is another failure, and so it has marked high, medium vulnerabilities along with links to the advisories. So this dependency scan uses a project I built called DevScan, which is open source. And DevScan is one of the most performant dependency scanning engine in the market, open source and commercial included. You saw that all of the scans, including dependency scan, completed in less than 2 minutes, and in case of WebGoat, less than 10 minutes. So this is one of the best scanning engine we have. Lastly, we have the license compliance status. License compliance is not a vulnerability, but it is nice to keep an eye on the the software bill of materials, the whole packages of list of open source packages the application use, and the license conditions associated with them. For example, in this case, there are 10 packages that requires the whole source code of the entire application or the service to be disclosed. So in regulated environments, in enterprises that cannot open source their applications, it is essential to keep an eye on the license conditions as well. So this is Scan working on Azure pipelines, and as you saw, it is very neatly integrated. There is a native extension for Azure, which is available in the marketplace. If you now look at GitHub, so on GitHub we have a GitHub Action, which is also free open source. The experience with GitHub looks like this. The console logging experience that I introduced with Azure, very similar. The build can automatically break depending on how it is being used. And with GitHub Action, there is an opportunity to have multiple workflow files. So the entire scanning can be a separate pipeline, and we can have application-specific pipelines and so on. And we actively test various combinations like a self-hosted runners, like a cloud-based runners, and things like that. So this is GitHub. Obviously, we can do better than this, isn't it? The console logging output is great, but what we did was we went a bit further than this. I'm happy to announce that we've been working with GitHub to natively integrate Scan into GitHub, right? So very soon, I think in 1 or 2 weeks time, any user of GitHub can go to the security tab on their repository, and they will see code scanning alerts. And when they click code scanning alerts, they will see ShiftLeft being integrated, or they will be able to easily add ShiftLeft as a code scanning application. And they can see all of these reports in line. I'd love to show a good demo, proper demo of this experience, but unfortunately, I'm not allowed to show before the GitHub official announcement, but please watch this space. Next is GitLab. So GitLab, very similar console log experience. And with GitLog, obviously, there is an option to click browse and see the artifacts, and it is possible to navigate and see the HTML reports in the browser itself. For example, this is the dependency scanning report that I showed you. And so it is completely usable. The experience is also quite interesting. Scan works on both hosted GitLab and cloud-based GitLab. We also actively test with combination of CI runners and things like that. So lastly, Scan working on Google CloudBuild. So I have a slide showing a lot of integrations, available integrations. And for integrations that I'm not able to show, it is quite possible that Scan kind of works, but we have not documented the steps yet. We have not configured it yet, and so on. So I did show like 4 different integration now, right? So my team at ShiftLeft should have worked extremely hard to make all these integrations, all these configurations happen, right? But no, Scan is actually very easy to integrate. So let me show you the actual documentation of Scan, right? So we have docs.shiftleft.io, and we have documented the steps required for various integrations. So if we start with, say, GitLab, most of the time, Scan configuration is like 3 or 4 lines of snippet. In fact, most of the time, you don't even have to know anything other than the word scan. And this is one of the philosophy, one of the vision behind ShiftLeft, that the security vendor should be the one doing the work of integrating with various CI platforms, various cloud tools, and not the customers. the customers should be using a product that just works out of the box. And we really believe in that. And what we do is internally at ShiftLeft, we run contests to find out who can produce the smallest configuration for a given pipeline, given cloud provider. And Google CloudBuild is like 3 lines, and we have Jenkins and so on. So we have documented all of the cases here. We spend a lot of time testing scan across various platforms to make the integration as simple, as seamless as possible. And it is also possible to customize, configure, and make a scan more suitable to the workflow. Like people say that open source projects will not have the speed, will not have the user interface, will not have the convenience of a commercial tool, right? And we really wanted to prove the whole industry wrong in all of these factors. And scan is both fast and secure. We didn't want to compromise on anything. And in fact, scan is one of those products that will make security completely embedded into DevOps, that DevSecOps will become a reality. No developers will get blocked because the scanning tool is slow, and no product will go out with known risks in it, because scan is free and there's like no reason not to use scan at all. We have scan listed in the marketplace. So this is the Visual Studio marketplace. So far, we saw scan working on the CI platforms, right? But the company name is ShiftLeft. And we know that build is not left enough, isn't it? Because the leftmost part of the DevOps workflow starts from code, isn't it? Thinking about code, writing code, and the fact of code and so on. So without any delay, I'm going to demo scan working on VS Code. So on VS Code, scan can be installed as a free extension. It's called ShiftLeft Scan. So when you install ShiftLeft Scan, it will show up like this. It's a very simple user interface. There's no complication here. People in my industry talk about one-click scanning, one-touch scanning. And with scan, we have really delivered one-click experience. So if I go ahead and click this button, it is a big risk I'm taking, but let's see how it goes. Okay. There is some problem with my laptop. It keeps crashing. Apologies. So if you now go back to the slides, let's see if this comes back, and we can then carry on with VS Code demo. So I was talking about integrations. We have integrations with a number of popular CI platforms, cloud platforms. Like I said, for integrations that is not shown here, for example, say AWS CloudBuild, it is possible that we have not figured out the configuration yet, but scan will definitely work. And if the community finds the configuration that makes it work with AWS CloudBuild, please send us a pull request, and we'll be able to add you as a contributor and so on. So this is integrations, and I'm happy to take any questions, and then I will see if VS Code launches properly again. Okay, so I have a number of questions here, but please feel free to keep adding, and I'll be able to answer them at a time. So I have a question. Where does consumer contract validation from API perspective fit in? So I think I assume this is talking about API testing, API validation, isn't it? So with Scan, we focus on just the security testing aspects of the application. So presumably, I would hope that the functional tests, the API tests, are performed as another step in the build pipeline or in a different pipeline, and that the Scan pipeline is used for security testing. I hope that answers your question. Are you scanning a single container in the demo? So currently, Scan is scanning the application source code. So it is scanning the whole source code and the binary compiled version of the source code for vulnerabilities. But the container scanning product is in the works. I think it is going to come shortly, but we have not launched the container scanning product yet. And I want to focus a bit on the container scanning tool set, right? So we have a number of container scanning tools, some great open source tools, some great commercial tools. These tools, unfortunately, have the same flaw, which is they just scan the container without getting any inputs from the static analysis and the dependency scanner. The container scanner we are building as part of the ShiftLeft offering will be integrated into the static analysis and the dependency scanning tool. They will work seamlessly so that the container scanner's findings will be of a higher quality. It'll have the dependency information, how the application is being used, and it'll also understand the intricacies of a container. For example, is it a Docker container? Is it being hosted and orchestrated by a Kubernetes or an OpenShift environment, and so on? And it'll optimize its analysis, its approach. It'll either go deep or broad depending on all these information. And we believe this is the next generation for container scanning, and it is going to come shortly. Okay, so the next question I have is about the IDE integration. Apologies, I was not able to demonstrate. I will retry in a few minutes. Is there a central reporting mechanism? So with Scan, currently there is no central reporting mechanism yet. All of the Scan reports are stored in the pipeline itself as artifacts, and the IDE scan results are available in the developer's laptop itself. But we are thinking along the lines of having a remote service that can be either self-hosted or managed by ShiftLeft, that can then aggregate all of these information and then can do rich, deeper analysis and so on. So those are the ideas we are thinking in the roadmap. Thank you very much for asking that questions. I have a question in terms of does Scan support raw code with multiple folders? Yes. Scan can automatically detect the language and frameworks, and it can go deep into the folders, and even without any configuration, Scan can scan different languages, different frameworks, and so on. So we do support mono repos, folders with multiple applications. Yeah, the next question I have is, can you set the build to fail if the dependency is found? Requires disclosed source. Okay, that's an interesting question. So the question is, can we make it fail when the license conditions explicitly says disclosed source? We do not have that kind of a granular rule yet, but it is something we can add it to the backlog. And if the participant wants to send a pull request, we can definitely review it. Currently, the The rules are depending on the severity count, the types of severity and the types of scan and so on. So scan comes with its own built-in build breaker logic, and it is possible to customize this logic by having a configuration file in the repo. But this is a level deep, and definitely will be happy to explore this idea. Thank you. And the next question I have is, how do I get the reports on premise? So like I said, Scan is a CA-based local scanner. When the user uses the configuration, the whole scanning engine is pulled as a Docker image, and all of the scanning is performed locally in the CA build agent itself. So the reports will be available in the CA system, even if it is an on-prem CA like GitLab hosted CA or Jenkins. We can access the report internally. There is no requirement for a server. If there is a published CVE, does your tool look at the code to check if the vulnerability is being used or not? Yes, that is one of the way our depth scan works, integrated with our static analysis. Because we built all of these integration layers ourselves, we make the tools work together and then filter out obvious false positives where the dependencies are not being used and so on. The question is, does Scan do specific scanning like OWASP top 10 and so on? Scan does a full comprehensive static analysis based security testing. So we kind of outperform a number of commercial products in the market sometimes with our scanning engine. So this is not just OWASP top 10. This is most of the security that can be identified with static analysis, with class-based analysis. Okay, the question I have is, can you scan for secrets in endpoints? This is interesting. So we do static analysis based credential scanning. What that means is if the endpoints are being deployed in the form of a Kubernetes configuration or a Terraform, we can then scan those files for any obvious credential leaks or even vulnerabilities in terms of missing firewall rules or missing IAM permissions or overly generous permissions and so on. But in terms of testing the endpoints externally, no, Scan is not a DAST or a endpoint monitoring software. The philosophy we have is, if security gets moved to the left, so we do scanning in the code in the development phase itself, it makes it very easy to identify and fix vulnerabilities without resorting to expensive penetration test, expensive cloud monitoring, endpoint monitoring, and so on. So we believe that security should be shifted left and done in the IDE, in the CI pipelines itself. And there are questions like, is your tool Dockerized? Yes, we use container image, and our container image is compatible with a number of CI platforms. That's why the configuration looked extremely simple. In most cases, say GitLab, CircleCI, even Azure, we can run Scan as a container job, and we don't, instead of using an Azure container to then spin up Scan container, we can directly spin up Scan container to do even automatic build and automatic test. So it is neatly documented in our docs site. So yeah, we make heavy use of container images, container OCI technology to simplify integration. So I have question on, are you scanning the entire repo or individual modules in a repo? We scan the entire application. It is definitely tempting to scan individual file or individual module, but what I found most of the time was a change made in one source could actually affect another module in another package, another source. So it made sense to always scan the whole application. And scan is so fast that most of the typical applications can be scanned in less than 2 or 3 minutes. So we don't believe scanning an entire application is a problem at all that needs fixing. Does your IDE plugin provide remediation help? Yes, it does actually. Unfortunately, I'm planning to restart VS Code to see if it works for this demo. But yes, it does provide some useful tips, remediation tips. The challenge with remediation tips is that because of the differences in the programming languages and so on, we are not able to provide examples for the exact programming language that's being used in the IDE. Maybe with community support, those are the areas we can definitely improve and optimize. I have a question on license infringement. I think I have answered it already. Please keep sending the questions. I'm not sure how we are looking on time. Andrew, any idea how we are looking? Looks like we have some time. So please keep sending the question. Okay, the next question I have here is how is the experience on C, C++? I think it's a great question. What we found was one of the primary scanning tool for C, C++ in the market is a product called Joanne, which was developed by one of our chief scientists called Fabian as part of his PhD dissertation. And the technology behind Joanne became widely adopted by the industry. There were several players in the market who started referencing to the project and started making alternative implementations that enhanced Fabian's project and so on. At ShiftLeft, we have a commercial product called Inspect that makes use of the code property graph technology that was pioneered by Joanne. So Joanne supports C, C++ scanning. Unfortunately, when I built Scan, I was not able to integrate Joanne scanner into Scan because the Joanne scanner itself required a bit of a computing resource, which most CI agents did not cater for. For example, anything over 4 gig RAM, CI agents used to crash, like how the IDE crashed for me here. So we made a conscious decision not to bundle the Joanne scanner, but Joanne is also open source, and we can point to users who would like to configure Joanne scanner and test C, C++ themselves. Okay, so the next question I have is, what is your score for OWASP benchmark and Julie test suite? That's an interesting question. Thank you for that. So OWASP benchmark, for people who are new, is a project that can be used to evaluate SAST part of any scanning tool. So the way OWASP benchmark work is you can essentially do the test and submit the result only once. after the test, when you optimize and then try to resubmit, the benchmark didn't accept the result. So the very first time I ran the scan, the score was 43 out of 100, which surprisingly was one of the highest, because as per OWASP, the next best commercial competitor was like 32 out of 100. And we were very excited. We were like, oh, we beat OWASP with open source. And then I started looking at the benchmark, and I found that a lot of obvious things can be improved. So I tried to improve, tweak scan, and do a benchmark again. And I was not able to resubmit the result. And then I realized that perhaps the 32 score for the commercial player maybe is an outdated score. So the commercial players would have optimized their tool by now. So OWASP benchmark is nice. It is a number, but the leadership board is unfortunately meaningless. In terms of Julie test suite, I have not heard of it, but the beauty of Scan is it is open source. So please feel free to benchmark Scan against any known benchmark suite, any commercial tool, any open source tool, and share the feedback, and we can improve the tool together for the benefit of the whole community. So I have questions about our commercial offering, which is Inspect, but I feel like maybe those questions we can do it offline, or talk to the people who can represent Inspect. Do you have any adapters into existing scanners? It is a very interesting question. Yes, the architecture behind Scan is to make it seamlessly integrate known open source scanners. We evaluate scanners based on their effectiveness, if efficacy it is called, and then we work on the configuration, integration aspects to make the scanners work with Scan. So if there are any tools out there that can be integrated, so please send us a pull request. We can either try to integrate ourselves, or we can advise the best way to integrate the scanners. Scan itself is built in Python, and I think it's relatively straightforward to understand and start enhancing scanner. So I have a few more questions, but I'm going to quickly see the situation with VS Code and see if I can give a demo. What I understand is the conferencing software is kind of causing a load on my system. So let's see if VS Code is back. Okay, so what it has now done is, because of the previous scan, it has automatically showed the result. So with Scan, you have a single button you have to click, and once you click, the results show up here, and these results are completely usable. So we have really tried to push VS Code hard to improve the experience, and in the process, as you can see, we are making it crash. But the good news is this is version 1. We can keep improving the experience. So as you select a finding, we show details about the rule that caused the finding, and we also neatly kind of highlight the line, and we show useful tips as to how people can improve, remediate, and so on. So let me highlight here. So there are some helpful text, and what we also do is we have an option to navigate across all of the findings. So this is like very effortlessly we can scroll and we can see all of the findings, and it also works for credential scanning. So we can scan for any known secret leaks, any credential exposure, even before the code gets committed to the Git repo. Because once the code gets committed to the Git, we have to go through expensive rebase operations and force pushes and so on. And we believe it is best to detect secrets at the point of development itself and prevent developers from knowingly commit secrets and credentials into the Git repository. So this is a demo of Scan as a VS Code extension. We have managed to move security scanning right into the IDE itself with this extension. And we support all of the languages that Scan support, which is listed in the README file in the GitHub repository. To use VS Code extension requires no configuration. It is literally go to the VS Code extensions marketplace, install, and then press the button to scan. And yeah, it integrates with VS Code like how a developer would expect a tool to be. And it can provide insights. It can provide useful tips. The tips are currently not comprehensive, but it is possible to improve them with the community support and so on. So let me go back to the slide I was here, and I can see more questions here. So looks like we have a few more minutes, so I can see questions that I've not answered yet. So I have questions like how up to date is the vulnerability information. So we currently download the vulnerability database during each scan. So it is kind of quite up to date, but we do have some caching, some optimization techniques to prevent unnecessary downloads, multiple downloads, and so on. It is possible to configure this experience. The configuration parameters are in the repository, but even without any configuration, the database is quite accurate, quite up to date, as good as any other commercial database you would expect with DevScan. I have questions along like, does it work with IntelliJ platform? So we do not have IntelliJ extension yet, but that's something definitely we would love to have it in our roadmap, and we are able to take any pull requests. I have a question like, do you have IAST solution, not as open source, but please do check our website for the commercial products for IAST. I have a question on whether we support Visual Studio. So this is a Visual Studio Code extension. We have a separate extension for Visual Studio under development. So that will be published shortly, but this is for VS Code. I have a question on, I think we have time for one or two more questions if somebody wants to quickly send it across to me. So I have a question on how the license audit works. It's a very detailed technical question. So I think it's best if the participant refers to the repository. We have information on how the license audit check works and so on. And if they want further technical clarification, they can feel free to contact us via GitHub issues or using my contact details. But I think we have time for one more question. I think if somebody wants to quickly no, I'm not getting any new questions. So I think yeah, I think that's all we have from the audience. But thank you very much for all the wonderful questions, and apologies for the hiccups with VS Code. But with demos and with feedback like this, that is how we obviously improve and make the product far superior for the benefit of everyone.